Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane, and it's the morning of Tuesday, the 4th of September, 2018. Now, I'm out in this somewhat Lord of the Rings-esque landscape here in the southwest of England, and it could well be that this is a total vanity broadcast on the basis that I may actually be the only one who can see it. Seeing as yesterday, it seems that Facebook put a block on the live stream literally within a few seconds of starting. So, yesterday, basically, it was nigh on impossible for anyone to view yesterday's live stream on Facebook. It seemed that whatever was tried to share it, it seemed that Facebook had some kind of algorithm that blocked it. Fortunately, at the moment, YouTube don't seem to be putting quite such a block on it. But this censorship shouldn't come as any surprise. And this is because the British government and the mainstream media, particularly the right-wing media, although I have to say that the Guardian is becoming increasingly right-wing, it would seem. But the reality is that they know that they are losing control of the narrative. They know that more and more people are rejecting the traditional media as their primary source of information. So, as people stop buying the newspapers, as people increasingly stop purchasing a TV license because basically they don't watch TV, then there is a problem for those who are trying to control a narrative. They thought they'd perfected the art, but it's rapidly disappearing from them. So we're going to have to get very creative. So today, basically, I'm broadcasting from one of my perhaps more obscure Facebook pages, but we'll see how that works. And of course, I will keep broadcasting on YouTube. So if you do get the opportunity and you think it's worthwhile, then please share it around because, basically, that's how we breach the mainstream and central government control of the narrative, by sharing. And instead of it being one big rock going into the pond like the BBC, it's literally a handful of pebbles being thrown into the pond and all the ripples then interconnecting and eventually sort of reaching the shoreline. And that's what we're going to have to do. And yesterday's broadcast was very much focused on permitted development and the fact that we are now a little over halfway through the consultation period that the government announced back in July regarding literally granting the mother frackers permission to rock up and simply plant their rig wherever it is they have access rights. In other words, whichever landowner or local authority has effectively sold their soul in return for a few shekels to allow these mother frackers to establish their rig. And there won't be anything that anyone can do about it. So it will basically be exactly the same as, as has been described, people wanting to build a sort of small extension to their house or put up a shed in the back garden or change usage from office to residential. It'll be the same process. But in this case, of course, it won't be just planting a rig. It'll be constructing a 0.98 hectare. It'll have to be under a hectare because otherwise they have to do a full environmental impact assessment. So it'll be 0.98, say, of a hectare that will simply be converted into a pad, well site. And ultimately, of course, you don't drill unless you intend to frack. And there is another issue here, of course, which we must not allow to go under the radar. And that is the issue of deep geological disposal. And for some time now, effectively ever since Cumbria County Council shut down the plans by Allerdale and Radioactive Waste Management to draw up plans for a deep geological disposal facility in the district of Allerdale in Cumbria. Well, that's no longer on the table. So, of course, Radioactive Waste Management are now looking for another gullible, what's the word I'm looking for? Receptive local authority to take their bribe to be considered as a location for the disposal of highly toxic nuclear waste. And, of course, one of the propositions put forward is that the waste could be buried down deep boreholes. And if anyone thinks that's just a conspiracy, then just simply take a look at the work of Professor Fergus Gibb at Sheffield University, who is on point here to look at the technology associated with deep geological disposal. So, this sorry mess doesn't get any prettier, except that there are an increasing number of people in this country who are starting to, one, reject the mainstream media as their source of information, and two, actually start to take an interest in what is going on around them, and they are starting to participate. And of course, this is what the establishment doesn't want. It doesn't want people to participate in the process. It wants your vote, and then it wants you to disappear, basically, until the next election. It wants you to crack on and work every damn hour under the sun to keep a roof over your head and food on your table like a good piece of human resource. It doesn't want you to take an interest in what's occurring. But fortunately, many more people are. And this survey, this permitted development questionnaire, which I will link again under the videos today, as I did yesterday, and please share it around, because this is being done by SurveyMonkey, would you believe? But nonetheless, it's extremely important that basically the responses to this survey show very, very clearly that people from right across the country, from right across the social and the political spectrum, reject even the potential prospect of something like hydrocarbon exploration ever becoming permitted development. There is due process to go through, and of course that process is what is holding up the unconventional gas companies, the frackers, the wannabe frackers, and they're putting enormous pressure on the British government to short circuit that process, because, you know, unfortunately the people who work in this industry, they literally have no conscience. The only thing that drives them is greed, and more fracking greed. They are not interested in even taking a look at the legacy that this industry has left communities elsewhere around the world, particularly in the US, in Canada, and in Australia, where it has effectively destroyed prime agricultural farmland, has destroyed much of the available local water supply, and is now pouring toxins into the atmosphere. And if you're comfortable with that, then make an application to the likes of Quadrilla or Ineos or iGas, and I'm sure that they'll probably bung a few quid your way. But I think that any right-thinking person, anyone who's capable of thinking beyond the end of the current salary period, people who are capable of thinking multi-generationally, will recognize that this is not the way to go, and that it is now entirely up to people who really just want to go about their day-to-day lives. They don't want to engage in the bullshit of the political process, but right now, basically, there isn't any other option. So please do take a look at this questionnaire, this permitted development questionnaire. I think there's just 7 questions on it, plus an opportunity to add your comments. But let's send a massive message to Greg Clark and to James Brockenshire that this is not something that is acceptable to the British public. And if they pursue this, then fundamentally they will be held to account, and their political careers, and both of them potentially have quite long political careers ahead of them. But if they push ahead with this, those political careers could come to a very rapid halt. So, permitted development, very much the key issue. But yesterday as well, of course, was the a UCOG injunction. Now, that took an interesting turn because it seems that UCOG solicitors, very fortunately for us, but unfortunately for them, announced the judge's ruling before the judge. So they are currently under consideration for being held in contempt. And of course, they must be held in contempt, because had the boot been on the other foot, had it been one of the protection community that had released that announcement before the judge, then of course the likelihood is that they would have spent some time perhaps in the police cells and would be facing a custodial sentence. So, you know, watch this space, because the solicitors need to be held to account. UCOG need to be held to account. But these companies, they think they are above the law. They certainly believe that they are above parliamentary law, because when parliamentary law, in their opinion, doesn't go far enough to protect them from the objections of the local communities, then they simply rock up at a civil court and get an injunction put in place. And it seems that Justice Mail pretty much just cut and paste the quadrilla injunction ruling, and he's effectively pretty much put that in place, unless anyone wants, of course, to take it to full trial. Or, of course, he could do the right thing and basically throw it all out because of the contempt shown by UCOG and their solicitors. So obviously things are also ramping up in the Midlands and South Yorkshire and North Nottinghamshire, and it's wonderful to see communities like Marsh Lane coming together. And this is really what it's all about. This is what it's been about all the way through. It hasn't been about establishing protection camps. It's been about supporting local communities come to the realization that it's their communities that are under attack. And in Marsh Lane, that community absolutely gets it. And the footage of the farmer literally revving his tractor and driving it into one of the local residents who happened to be standing at the gate on his phone at the time, so not paying attention to what the farmer was doing, and yet the farmer drove straight into him, and then showing no interest in the well-being of the person he just knocked over, simply reversed and then drove his tractor through a hedge into an adjoining field. So, you know, this pretty much shows, you know, what we're dealing with. So the other thing, of course, is very much the water quality. And, Quadrilla, of course, do have that permission to crack on with the frack. But it still seems to me that they got a long way to go. They got to get all the kit on site there. They got to set up the frack spread. They got to run all the pressure testing. And yet, of course, the reservoirs in the northwest of England are looking decidedly sick. After a long, hot, stunning summer, the reservoirs have obviously taken a big hit. And although United Utilities had announced that they were going to they were going to put a hosepipe ban in place from August the 7th, then it would seem that under sort of considerable pressure from elsewhere, they decided that they wouldn't actually put the hosepipe ban in place. And that, of course, takes a little bit of the heat off of Greg Clark and James Brockenshire, except that there is the risk that communities in the northwest of England serviced by United Utilities are rationed at some point, unless there is some extremely heavy rainfall in the coming weeks to replenish the reservoirs. And yet the forecast is that we're going to have an Indian summer. So, watch this space. And I was contacted by somebody yesterday from Ennerdale in Cumbria. Now, Ennerdale has, I believe, been part of the country where the water has traditionally been provided not from reservoirs, but from Ennerdale Lake. But some time ago, United Utilities announced that they were going to stop abstracting water from Ennerdale Lake, and they were going to establish some boreholes in the area, where the people of the Ennerdale area in Cumbria are becoming increasingly concerned about the noticeable drop in the quality of their water. So the questions are being asked in that area is, what is the real motivation behind ceasing the abstraction of water from Ennerdale Lake for going to boreholes when the borehole quality is considerably less than what was coming from the lake? And there is some concern that this may also be linked to establishing a geological disposal facility in the area. So anyone who thinks that this current administration, or probably any administration for that matter, can be trusted, really needs to take a check on their worldview, because we are increasingly in a situation where the corporations are dictating the agenda. I mean, just look at what's occurring with social media. You know, it's basically in the hands of somebody or a few people at Facebook, at Google, at Microsoft, at Apple, and Amazon, of course. And that's pretty much about it. You know, 5 companies. So whereas once upon a time it was the media barons, the newspaper barons, now it's the appointed individuals in the social media companies. So we have to be extremely creative and find ways to actually get our message out there. And of course, the old-fashioned way of actually meeting people, or talking to people, you know, in the towns, in the marketplace, or holding local events, you know, absolutely is the way forward. Anyway, I have no idea if anybody actually managed to see this video this morning. I'll check on that a little bit later, but I will post the links to the permitted development questionnaire, and please do whatever you can to share this questionnaire and encourage people to take, you know, what is it, 30 minutes, maybe an hour, to participate in this questionnaire, because right now actually it's one of the most important questionnaires that anyone could take the time to complete. So you have a great day. It looks like we've had quite a bit of rain overnight down here in the southwest. It's a little bit cooler right now, but hey, you know, it's nice to perhaps have a break from the heat. But I will catch with you tomorrow at 8:30, Facebook and YouTube permitting, that is, of course. Okay, take care.